I like to hear the relationships of sound. How does a line actually sound with this music?
On one side of the line is life.
And it's like, what is the visual payoff for this?
The other, death.
When a line is said, the music is answering.
We're setting up like a dramatic speech here.
There can be greatness.
You hear her unsheath the sword into the next shot and then cut.
The dialogue, you're also using it kind of as another instrument.
One creature can.
For me, it's just music. This is just one big song. It's building onto something.
I do not know their
We're
names.
building a question usually,
I do know their fate.
and that stop down's the answer.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Editing Everywhere All at Once, the podcast where we talk to editors from across the industry, gaining insights into their editing philosophies and techniques. Today we are joined by award-winning trailer editor Michael Zayas, who has worked for huge studios such as Disney, Fox, and Amazon Prime, cutting trailers for Indiana Jones 5, Avatar: The Way of the Water, and more recently Netflix's Blue Eye Samurai. Michael will be explaining how he uses dialogue as music to build and edit, how and when to use visual payoffs, and how he came to make some of the key choices that made this trailer so memorable.
Never been introed like that, so that was kind of cool. It felt pretty cool. So
I'm gonna give you a little bit of the context of what the assignment was, and then I'll go through it. I think that'll be helpful. Netflix wanted a slow trailer that didn't really rely on story, but that would speak to cinephiles. They kept saying, we want to live in the world. We want to know what the world feels like. So like we want to have that experience. So when I was watching the show, I was like, wow, that was my mind. It's like, what are the dramatic bites that we can frame the trailer under?
No one man can defeat an army.
every editor is going to be different, but I'm very sound music oriented. Before I do a lot of deep into any visual, I'm almost always cutting the sound bed first. I have the music and the dialogue cut, not giving a crap about picture. A senior editor, when I was up and coming, taught me to close my eyes and listen to the cuts, and that's what I'll do.
A lot of the decisions you're making are derivative from sound bites, like
Yes.
quote unquote the script almost.
With trailers, music are such a big part of trailers. How the dialogue sounds with the music. Are the bites telling the story it needs to tell? And like, how are we teeing the stuff up?
What are you?
That's what it kind of revolves around.
I have a name.
You can kind of break this piece out into like 3 pieces. And that's the intro, establishing the world.
What is a sword?
Then we have the transition,
There can be greatness.
where we're kind of finding out more about kind of the scope of the danger. And then it's just a big back end, the big grand finale. Just showing you kind of launching into all the stuff that's gonna happen. And it was just figuring out how do we make them seamlessly come together so they don't feel like 3 pieces. It starts off as that drone, right? It starts off a drone and then doo-doo. Right, that's a progression. Right, that's a progression. It's like increasing. It's like building more momentum. It's adding something. So anytime we're progressing, I'm in full control of the progression. If you lay out the song the way it is, it's going to sound completely different. Yeah. What you're doing in trailers is you're basically truncating the progression. Because it's the same progression in the song, it's just I'm just shortening it so we get to it faster. And so that you can use as a tool because it's subconsciously telling the audience member, oh, this cut is building. And so now when you have that as a tool, it's like what lines are triggering that progression in the music. We're in the world.
We're seeing them walk through the market.
It's building onto something. And then we see this character's feet.
What is a sword?
Doo-doo! Right? So I'm leading you, and then that line is triggering.
We're setting up like a question. We're setting up like a dramatic speech here.
It's launching now into the trailer, and then what I'm doing, I just keep taking it further.
It is a line.
That's the stuff you want to build. That's how you help do the build. Again, it's just in service of having full control of me commanding when the next progression is going to happen.
That's why also the intro, the first half is so slow as well. We're in service of, they want a slow trailer that really, every shot we're soaking it in. We see her walk up, we see the kids running up on the hill. It's like about soaking that in.
On one side of the line is life.
And so visually, how are you also matching that sort of progression?
The other, death.
The sound and the dialogue, that is what's going to inform the picture. Because every line, you have to think of the line as a setup. And it's like, what is the visual payoff for this?
I think the most noticeable example of that happening here is
On one side of the line is life.
you sort of set up that moment with the line.
The other, death.
the music helps pay it off, and then the action on the frame pays it off like pretty fully there. Did you find the visuals first? Did you see the line first and you were like, okay, I can do something here and here with this? Or like how did you land on that transition?
The whole bird killing that happened way after I found that line. So really what I had first was like the music laid out and the line there. That line was placed there pretty early on. What the moment was to kind of accent that took a while to get to. So it's like I had broken down that shot of her running, and then I always knew that wide shot of the dude slitting through. I always knew that was great for the trailer, but I didn't know the place for it. It's like you really never know. Like
anytime you're really like focusing on a cut, and if you're having trouble, there's usually one moment or one thing that kind of breaks open that section for you, whatever that is. It just unlocks something where it's like, oh, I get it now.
That's something that happens as you do the work. That's when that happens. Like I couldn't have predicted I was gonna use her running with the bird cut to the guy cutting the throat. Like
that's what's important for me about laying all the sound up and stuff, and just hearing the build with like all these voices also inspire different things. My base of inspiration is usually sound, and then as I'm going through shots,
Steel
that's when things start coming together.
is pure
it's a music and the sound design too.
and impure.
The sound design are accents. I'm using kind of layers of Foley sound.
Like that's a perfect example where it feels great to have a sound, like a kind of an accent there to kind of sell that moment.
Or those little things really, really help out to have us live even more in the world. So that's where you hear the sound of the snow or the footsteps.
And they're very subtle. It's not about overpowering. It's not like the footsteps are like bah bah bah. It's just a very subtle layer. And obviously there are moments to make the sound like really aggressive, which I do later on in the trailer, but just having that thin layer, you have to think like, what am I trying to call attention to? For example, like the sword coming down into the water. It's cool because he's talking about making swords and stuff, so I wanted to play off that line.
And these together.
So there's one moment that I really wanted to get into it. It's like when the demon face pops up. Like I wanted to talk about like a little bit how you made that like sound design happen and what the purpose of that was.
When I was breaking down, when that demon vision happened, I was like, that has to be in the trailer because it's such a memorable moment. And I was like, this is a great way to transition
There can be greatness.
into a new section, because I'm just trying to figure out like what are the big moments to help me kind of pass the baton there. And if you remember in the show, it's her VO under it. There's not sound design under that really. So I'm like, how can I use the music and sound to really make this such a memorable moment that leads us into that middle section? So for the sound design for this part, it was purely the inspiration from the shot itself. The way I saw it was, okay, we have the movement of her going up and then the movement of the face coming out. So how do I sound design that? So the scream of her going up is from, spoiler alert, later on in the show where she gets stabbed and she does this blood curdling scream. When she does the head back movement, I'm like, oh man, I wonder if when she screams, I wonder if that syncs up. So I did that first and it synced up great. And then another part of the show, in the second or third episode, she's fighting that dude, and that character, I loved that character because he had a very distinctive laugh. Ha ha ha! So again, I bookmarked that. And then when I was looking for sounds for the demon face, I was like, ooh, what if I do? What about that laugh? So it was like, ha 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 ha. I was like, okay, what can I do to take this to the next level? And basically what I did was the scream and the laugh, I duplicated 3 times, and then I experimented with different pitching. So one layer is just the regular, the next duplication is pitched down, and the other is slightly pitched up. And then there's a bunch of reverb. So that's why you're hearing it kind of slightly modulated, which is great because it like fits that dream-like quality, or like the nightmare-like quality in that. So that was all the reasoning behind doing all that sound design for that.
Coming out of that shot of the demon face, you're paying off like his speech underneath it. Even if you don't like, you're not entirely on board with what he's saying, like it's a little bit like you understanding like something ominous is happening, something serious is happening, and then you have this hard downshift.
There can be greatness.
And then you pay it off with like these next 4 shots, I think like work so well as the payoff to this intro.
So when I do a stop down, that's me as an editor going, shut the fuck up. Listen right now. Listen right the fuck now. Because if you notice, like, anytime it stops down with any trailer, it's like you're building up to something. You're building a question usually, and that stop down's the answer. I'm building like, oh, there's something going on. I should really be listening. Now listen.
Like, I think part of like what makes this work so perfectly is like it's cut straight from the demon face to Mizu's face here. So you know you're drawing that like subconscious connection from one thing to another.
I mean, everything you're saying is right. Like that's what we were building up to. Is like trying to kind of show that metaphor, and it finding the right moment to really land that, and that was like a big challenge. I mean, there was a million things we tried here, and then it wasn't until I found this shot, or I tried this shot of her in the snow, until it all finally came together. Okay. Often with editing, and this is with any aspect of editing, all it takes is one line or one shot to lay in there, and it just kind of cracks wide open creative. It all starts to kind of come together and make sense. Yeah. And that was once we found that really helped this section out.
One thing that I think stood out to me was like this shot of her jumping and like unsheathing the sword. See the sword coming out and then cut, and like visually, like it's not the same setting, it's not even the same color palette, but somehow it still works. Because I think a lot of it I would attribute to like that sound of Mizu unsheathing the sword. You hear her unsheath the sword through into the next shot. The action sort of follows through his head, I guess here. The next shot is also just like not even barely the same setting, but like you see the blood kind of come out. That stood out to me as like, I was like, yeah, that is like pretty brilliant, I thought.
Yeah, and it was really, it's like, what is the section to transition both ends? Because like the back end really is just music.
No one man can defeat an army, but one creature can.
Once we launched, that kind of came together pretty succinctly. Like, we just needed big moments. You know, we didn't have to have the burden of teeing up the story, so it was just finding about great dramatic lines from her.
Please give me the strength
to kind of push through.
to find the men I seek. I do not know their names. I do know their fate.
So I think a lot of people would have this idea to just kind of like cut on beat always. That moment, you know, like my initial instinct as an editor would probably be just to like cut on beat, like a bunch of rapid things or something happening on screen. You don't do that, and for some reason it still like definitely works for me. Maybe it has to do with it setting up the ending a little bit better or something, but like what was your reason to not maybe do something like that?
So I mean, again, that is having a true north, and I knew the true north was slow. I understand that instinct to, and there are times where you want to do that with a drum roll like that, especially in Tataru. You want to just throw everything at but again, this is all in service of what are the goals. What are the goals of the trailer? They want a slow trailer that really, every shot we're soaking it in. We're soaking it, because the show is so, I mean, talk about a wealth of riches. I mean, every shot in that show is like a painting. I mean, it's crazy. So that's ultimately that decision.
They also mentioned Kill Bill. They love that vibe of Kill Bill. Obviously, it was a big influence of the show. Right. So with that in mind, the ending of the trailer was the first thing that I cut together.
I have it written down.
So, yeah, we literally talked about this.
I did have it written down, I promise.
What are you? I have a name.
Literally the first thing that came in that I had immediately thought of in the breakdown, when I watched it, I was like, okay, the moment of her cutting the dude, that's a badass moment. I was like, that's a great way to end the trailer. And then specifically, if we go literally the last shot before the title, that movement with the thing with the glasses, that I was like, that's the end of the trailer. Yeah. But I knew that was the end of the trailer, but the line she says in the show is not that line.
Where is Heiji Shindo?
I don't know. I swear.
But that shot's so great, it's so emotional, and we don't see her lips, so I could literally slot in any line in there. So I was like, that's the last shot of the trailer, that's the last moment. So that I basically had cut. And then as I was watching and breaking down the show, the next episode,
All Kyoto is talking about the unnamed samurai who cut through Shindo Dojo.
I have a name.
oh, that's the last, that's literally, that's the line, that's the ending of the trailer. And I wrote that down. Yeah. I was like, eyeglasses shot this episode, I have a name this episode. I wrote it down on the side. Yeah. So literally when I started cutting, that was the first thing I did. I was like, let me see if that works. Yeah. And put that against the title. I was like, yep, that's it. So that was like literally the first thing that went in.
I have a name.
Whether you're a fan of Blue Eye Samurai, trailers, or editing in general, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Editing Everywhere All at Once. We covered a lot of ground, so if you made it this far, we would appreciate it if you dropped a like if you liked the video, and subscribe for more videos like this one, as well as following our socials for more editing content. All of that is linked below, along with some of Michael's work and where you can follow him. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.